Okay.
Well, good evening, everybody from London, and welcome to another Harif lockdown lecture. It is wonderful to have you all here. Happy New Year, and I hope you're feeling okay after Yom Kippur and ready for a new beginning and a new year. It is 55 years since Israel's victory in the Six-Day War, and that's why we decided to have this lecture, which is actually in two parts, about the backlash to the 1967 Six-Day War on Jews who still lived in Arab countries. But first of all, let me just explain to those who don't know Harif what our mission is. Our mission is to educate and raise awareness of history and culture of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. And we have a website, www.harif.org, and a sister website which keeps you up to date with the news, and that's called Point of No Return. Just Google Point of No Return blog and you will find it. All those who are not regular subscribers to Harif, you can subscribe by going to our website, and you will therefore get details of all the lectures that we do and the login details. This lecture is being recorded, and it's also being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page. So as I was saying, tonight's event really is dedicated to the backlash or the impact on Jews in Arab countries of the Six-Day War. The Six-Day War, of course, changed the politics of the Middle East, but it also led to this dramatic backlash on the few thousand Jews still living in Arab countries. And it brought remaining communities to the brink of extinction. And in almost all countries, there were demonstrations and anti-Jewish riots as the mobs vented their anger on local Jews because of Israel's stunning defeat of the Arab armies. And some of the consequences were absolutely tragic. There were executions, there were imprisonments, and there was torture in some of the countries, for instance, in Iraq and in Egypt. So in June, we had part one of the program. We heard witness testimonies on the anti-Jewish backlash in Libya, in Egypt, and in Iraq. And you can see a video recording by going to our YouTube channel at www.harif.org. So this evening is part two, in which we will be hearing testimonies, hopefully from Rabbi Eli Abadi. We're still waiting for him.
He didn't have the link, I just sent
him. Oh, okay, right, who should be joining us very shortly. He fled Lebanon, and Arela Lewis, who is evacuated from Aden in 1967. Unfortunately, Penina Elbaz is unable to join us, but we will still be examining the impact of the backlash to the Six-Day War on Jews in Morocco and even in Tunisia. And if you have questions for our speakers, please put them in the chat. And if you left any of these countries and have a personal story to tell, we would be very happy to hear from you. So shall we just start with Arela?
Okay, let me get the slides up.
Okay, I think we'll go over to you, Arela. Arela Lewis was a child born in Aden, and she will tell her story in the next 10 minutes and tell us how and why she left Aden in 1967. So over to you, Arela. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll talk about my personal recollection of the last few days of the Aden community in Aden in 1967, and also the events that led to that. I've got a map here of the position of Aden. Port of Aden is situated at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, south of Yemen. And unlike today, Aden was not part of Yemen. It was a British colony since 1839. And that made all the difference. There was a small Jewish community then, numbering a few hundred. And I've got a picture here of Prince of Wales meeting with Jewish representatives about 100 years ago in September 1922. The Jews in Aden.
There is the picture. Right.
That's, yeah, Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, visiting Aden and meeting with the Jewish representatives in Aden. Okay, the Jews were concentrated in 4 streets in the crater area of Aden, which is a relic of a dormant volcano. Now, talking to my grandparents and so on, the relationship with the Arabs was always uneasy. And sometimes it fled into violence against the infidel Jew. But in December 1947, after the United Nations passed a resolution to establish the State of Israel, the Arabs went into a 3-day murderous rampage. Jewish properties and shops were set on fire. There was total devastation, and Arabs even broke into Jewish homes to loot and kill. My cousin Shoshana, who was 7 at the time, actually witnessed the murder of her grandfather, being murdered by Arabs who slit his throat. Ironically, she was saved by another Arab who found her wandering in the street and returned her to the community. Many families, including my own, fled their homes and went to hiding. The APL, which is the Aden Protectorate Levy, made up of Arab soldiers under the British control, came into the Jewish area eventually, pretending to restore order, but actually opened fire on the Jews, killing about 80. And the next picture, we show a memorial at Hoka Bay, showing a mass grave of those Jews who were killed and the names engraved. Eventually calm was restored, but by now the Aden Jews were very fearful that this can happen again. And with this creation of a new Jewish state, the majority made Aliyah, including many members of my family. Nevertheless, remaining Jews began to prosper again. Things were not too bad. And that carried on for a while. And because Aden was a British colony, there were close ties with the Jewish establishments in the UK, especially with the Board of Deputies and Chief Rabbinate. Teachers were sent from the UK to teach in the Jewish school. I did not go to the Jewish school. I went to a convent school. And my first experience of Arab intolerance to other religions was when I was in the kindergarten. I was only there for a few days when an Arab girl, same age as me, came and asked me, Ish Aslik, what are you? What is your ethnicity? At that age, I didn't know what she was talking about. So she clarified that she was a Muslim and I was a kufriya, an infidel. Meant anything to me. Okay, so in 1966, go forward, 1966, the situation became unstable again. The Arabs were getting restless. They wanted the British out. They wanted independence. The Jews knew that there's no future for them once the Arabs got independence. We heard bombs, grenades exploding every day, followed by gunfire. British personnel were targeted, and anyone perceived to be collaborating or even fraternizing with the British was likely to be assassinated. It was a bleak time for the British and definitely for the Jews as well. In January 1967, I was in the classroom when a member of our community came to the school and asked to speak to a Jewish girl. There was a commotion amongst the teachers and the nuns, and some of us came out from the classroom to see what's going on. And I'll never forget the look of sheer terror on the face of the girl as she came out from her classroom, asking what's going on, what's happening. The man came to tell her that her father had just been murdered in the marketplace, and he was taking her home. As we got back to the classroom, I noticed an Arab girl smirking, laughing. The teacher reminded her that the victim is a father of family. She just laughed and said, Yahudi, a Jew. My father had a lucky escape. He was in his shop with my uncle when two terrorists entered carrying a gun and a knife. They demanded money and threatened to kill them. My uncle, who fought with the IDF in the 1956 Sinai campaign, wrestled with them and tried to disarm them, and they soon left and fled. Just before the 6-Day War, the poisonous propaganda of Gamal Abdel Nasser against Israel and against the Jews encouraged the Aidini imams to incite the locals. They screamed on the radio, kill the Jews, don't waste time looting, everything will come to you anyway. Don't make the same mistake you did in 1947, kill the Jews. In contrast to 1947, there was no mass killing this time. And that's because of continuous British military surveillance and patrol. However, cars and property belonging to Jews were set on fire. Water pipes feeding Jewish homes were ruptured, were destroyed, leaving us without any water. In view of the fact that the British were preparing to pull out of Aden, unknown to us, in September that year, the Aden community in the UK, along with the Board of Deputies, were liaising with the British government, and Barnett Jenner was also very much involved to arrange for a plane to fly us out of Aden. Mr. Abraham Marks, the last headmaster of Aden, of the Jewish school, was very active in that. And he made proper arrangements for evacuation. It became impossible for the British to extend their protection to the individual Jewish families which were scattered all over the 4 streets. So they were collected, gathered by the military, one by one, family by family, and transported out of Crater into Steamer Point, into a hotel belonging to a Jewish family. There was also another nearby building which accommodated the Jews. The Jews left with nothing except hand luggage. We're leaving everything behind. The 2 buildings were guarded round the clock by armed soldiers. We stayed in the hotel for about a month, 5 weeks, during which time the flames and smoke from a prestigious Jewish-owned store and the hotel above it was set on fire. And it made the owner who was staying with us break down in tears. Also during that time, a brave rabbi returned to Crater in an armed vehicle and managed to save many Sefer Torah from different shuls, which are now in Israel. We were actually in the hotel when the 6-Day War broke out. The Arabs will continue to burn properties, but they cannot get to us because we were guarded by the British soldiers. Mr. Marks was sent from the UK from London to Aden to oversee our evacuation. So in the middle of the night, on the 18th of June, the Jewish community, which numbered about 150, were, including myself and my family, were transported in an armed convoy by the British to an airfield where a plane was waiting for us, a British Caledonian. We left Aden at midday, and for fear for being shot down, the plane made a detour, which involved a stopover in Iran. As we disembarked, the Iranians, who were greeted by chants from the Iranians, "Israel is good, Israel is good," obviously referring to the Israeli victory. Our next stop was Israel, Lod Airport. We were surprised to be met by friends and relatives at the airport, and they've heard that we were going to be, well, of our imminent arrival. And there were photographers and journalists asking us questions about our ordeal. Approximately 100 people stayed in Israel, and the rest of us flew to Gatwick. A coach took us from Gatwick to the Jewish temporary shelter, where we stayed for about a month. And then we eventually left to go to Stamford Hill, and buy a house in Stamford Hill. And just to bring things up to date, the Southern Transitional Council of South Yemen is now arranging for the refurbishment of the ancient cemetery where in Mala, where my baby brother and my great grandparents are buried. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, Arela, for that very moving and dramatic story, which you told so well. And let's hope that the refurbishment of the Aden Cemetery, leads to a new chapter, a better chapter in relations between Arabs and Jews in Aden. Right, I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, which is Rabbi Eli Abadi. It's a great honor to have you here, Rabbi Abadi. I think we're just going to spotlight you. Is that right? Yes, I know you're here. Are you joining us from the UAE?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all,
Yes.
It's a pleasure and honor to join you this evening. I am in Dubai at this moment, and yes, in the UAE.
It's quite late there, isn't it? You're about 3 hours ahead
yes,
of London.
It's almost 11 p.m. Yes.
Oh my goodness me! Will you have the staying power to be with us for the next hour?
No, yes, no, you worry. I have, after your program, I have another Zoom. So.
Oh my goodness me! What time is that?
Exactly, that would be probably 12 midnight.
12 midnight. Okay, so well, if there are any questions, perhaps we can bring them forward so that you can answer them before the end of our program. So just to introduce you, Rabbi, as many people know, you are the senior rabbi of the Jewish Council of the Emirates, based in Dubai. And you are obviously very prominent in the Abraham Accords and pushing them through, which in itself is a very interesting subject to talk about, but it's not quite the subject that we're here to discuss tonight. What we want to know, Rabbi, is about life in Lebanon, where you were born, and how come you left Lebanon, what happened in 1967, and how you left. So without further ado, over to you, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Again, it's a pleasure and an honor to join you this evening. To be able to understand life in Lebanon and what happened then, I think I would like to share with you first the life that my parents had in Syria briefly, so I could bring you into Lebanon and life in there. As you know very well, that at the partition plan vote at the United Nations General Assembly on November 29, 1947, 10 Arab countries' population rose against the Jewish communities in their countries. And of course, Aden was one of them, Morocco was another one, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, Iraq. And so all of those countries, Arab population, they had 3 days of rage declared by the Arab League, in which many Jews were killed. In Syria itself, it's estimated that 75 Jews were killed on those 2-3 days, plus synagogues burned, Torah scrolls burned, Jewish businesses were looted and burned, people were mutilated. My parents lived right next door to the great synagogue in Aleppo, and as my mother was watching all what was happening, seeing how the police officer of the Syrian government was helping the masses, the youth, Arab youth masses, climb over the fence of the synagogue and helping them bring out Torah scrolls and burning them and taking the rabbi and throwing him in the street. And the next building was my parents' home. As she saw them climbing over the fence of my parents' building, my mother immediately grabbed my 3 oldest siblings, ran out of that house with nothing practically to her mom's house, and then she never went back. And from there, she escaped to Lebanon. My father helped her escape to Lebanon, but he remained in Syria for another 2 years to liquidate his business, which he could not liquidate. He was going back and forth until, of course, it was already illegal by then. The borders were closed for all Jews. Many Jews were imprisoned. They were not allowed to leave. My father was, of course, bribing officials and train conductors every time he would travel to Lebanon to see my mother and my siblings. Until finally one day, one officer of the Syrian, I guess, security services who knew my father came to him and told him, you know, we know you have been going back and forth illegally, you know, that is punishable very severely. And if you're caught, he says, but I'm letting you know because I know you, I'm going to have to arrest you tomorrow. For that. My father understood the message that he needs to escape that night immediately. And he basically ran to his home, or whatever he was staying by then, grabbed a small, maybe attaché case with his pair of fill-in books and maybe a pajama or something like that, whatever he had in his pocket cash-wise. And he ran to the train station where he knew the conductor who was also letting him every once in a while travel to Lebanon. And he told him the story, says, this is going to be the last time you're going to see me. So I need to make it to Lebanon once and forever. The conductor told him, of course, I will put you in the cargo car of the train with the animals, with the whatever cargo they had. You better have to hide. And the moment we reach the Syrian border, you need to hide very, very well because they're going to inspect that car. And if they find you there, well, you and I will face the same fate, basically, most likely death. So you better hide very well. And the moment after the inspection, I will leave the door open of the car as the train will start inching from the Syrian border to the Lebanese border. You need to jump out of the car and disappear. Because if you are not caught in the Syrian border, you will be caught in the Lebanese border. And that's exactly what happened. My father hid there. The inspection was taking place. My father tells me the story that he was almost being caught by maybe 1 centimeter difference as the officer was flashing the light all over the cargo. There was a distraction outside of the train. Most likely the conductor himself created it to distract the officer, and the officer was distracted and left, basically. Of course, he left him the door open. The train started going. Before they reached the Lebanese border, my father jumped into a ravine. It took him another 3 hours or so to walk to where my mom was. And that's how they began their life in Lebanon. That was in 1950. My mother left in 1947, 48. My father left 2 years later. In Lebanon, they lived in the town of Alay at the beginning, not in Beirut. Eventually, they moved to Beirut. They became part of the Jewish community, as many like them from Syria came to Lebanon, and many from Iraq came to Lebanon, escaped to Lebanon. Lebanon was under French mandate, then became independent. And kind of there was a very, very fragile social, religious matrix, so to speak, of living. As you know, in Lebanon, the president has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, the speaker of the parliament has to be a Shiite Muslim, and the foreign minister, the interior minister, a Druze. That's how life was in Lebanon. Very fragile, but the peace was maintained as France was very entrenched in Lebanon. The Jewish community really grew, as I said, by really leaps and bounds from many Syrian Jewish refugees. We were always considered refugees in Lebanon. We were never given a Lebanese passport, no matter if we were born there, no matter if a parent was born there or grandparent were born there. As long as you are not a Lebanese, so to speak, if you came from somewhere else, even 1,000 years later, and I'm exaggerating, but even if 50 years later, 100 years later, you're still a refugee. So you are a refugee, son of refugee, grandson of refugee, great-grandson of refugee. You're always a refugee. And so we were refugees in Lebanon. Our neighbors knew we were Jews, but we, of course, we did not walk in the street with a kippah. And we tried to maintain a very, very low profile. And every once in a while, we would hear a slur in the street from either a Muslim, a Christian, a Druze, an Armenian. It doesn't matter where it came from. It came. But that fabric was kind of fragilely maintained. And of course, even if we heard a slur, we never reported it. Or if we got a kick or something like that, we never reported it. Of course, we wanted to maintain a low profile. And that's how life was in Lebanon, which probably compared to the rest of the Arab world at that moment, it was paradise. Now, I was very, very, very young, not to reveal my age, but to tell you, in the 67 war, I remember very well that the Jews were extremely afraid. My parents were 24 hours listening to the radio. Even on Shabbat, they left the radio on because we didn't know, are we going to survive the night, or we're not going to survive the night? Will there be riots again against the Jews if, for anything that Israel would have done? But again, the status of refugee was always with us, no matter what we did, because all the paperwork that needed to be done for whatever official purpose, we were Syrian refugees. To tell you, as a parenthesis on the story, I became a Spanish citizen because a Sephardi by the law of Spain. And Spain wanted the original birth certificate from Lebanon. And I try to explain to them that we won't be able to get the original birth certificate from Lebanon. Well, they insisted. So we put a lawyer, and the lawyer for several weeks in Lebanon could not find my birth certificate. They went to the registry until another lawyer told them, well, are they Syrian refugees? They said, yes. He said, oh, there's a special office for Syrian refugees. That's where you're going to find the birth certificate. He says, yeah, but he was born in Lebanon. He is a Lebanese birth. He said, doesn't matter. His parents were refugees, his grandparents. You're going to find it in the office of Syrian refugees of the Ministry of the Interior. And lo and behold, the lawyer went there and found my birth certificate there. So to show you that no matter if you were born, always you were a refugee. So as refugees in the 6-day war, we were very, very concerned. And even the Lebanese Jews with Lebanese citizenship, they were all concerned. Everybody stayed at home. We did not leave our homes in the street. We had to cover all our windows and our light with blue color, they told us, because Israel was going to bomb, Beirut. The information was there. They were telling us. As I said, my parents for 6 days, of course, we did not leave the house either. We were concerned to go into the synagogue. We were concerned to go into the school. All the time we were listening. For pretty much 5 days, the only thing that I remember, my parents were lamenting and lamenting how Israel was being destroyed, because that's the news that we were receiving, that Israel was being destroyed, pummeled, all their air force was destroyed, all their infantry was destroyed. And so the fear increased day by day, because we knew if Israel is destroyed, we are next. You know, we as Jews living in an Arab country, we are next, and we did not know exactly what to do. It wasn't until that last day where my parents were able to get shortwave news from Israel, because Israel for the first 6 days was pretty quiet. They couldn't hear anything. And the only thing we heard is from Egypt, you know, the Arab radio. Finally, on the 6th day, when they were able to hear shortwave from Israel, that it was completely the opposite, that Israel had won the war remarkably, miraculously, and territorially even better. So, but now the fear increased because they said, oh, now they're going to take revenge on us because of that. And so the fear certainly increased. Of course, as a child of 5 years old, you know, it was difficult for me that I sensed the fear that my parents had. But one thing I must say about the Lebanese government. So we lived outside the Jewish neighborhood, the famous Wadi Abu Jmil in Beirut, known very well. That's where the main synagogue, Magen Avraham, is today, the only one left actually, standing in the city of Beirut. So my father was a rabbi of a synagogue, the second largest synagogue in Beirut, and it was in the Wadi Abu Jmil. It was in the Jewish neighborhood. The schools were in the Jewish neighborhood. So to go, we needed to leave where we live and walk there. It was a 10-15 minutes walk, but it was outside the Jewish neighborhood. So the government had stationed tanks, not a police car, tanks and military police cars at the entrance of the Jewish neighborhood and at the exit of the Jewish neighborhood. So anybody going in and out needed to identify himself or herself to her. So of course, the thought was, are they protecting us or are they encircling us? What is the purpose of these tanks? Are they because are they afraid we're going to do something, or they're afraid they're going to be something done to us by the population? So there were a difference of opinion amongst the leadership of the Jewish community at that time. But as a child, I saw it more as a protection, even though it was, you know, the first time in my life I had seen a tank in the middle of the city. It wasn't just in a battlefield, but in the middle of the city. And I remember one Shabbat, it was that Shabbat, as we were going to the synagogue, to the Bet Knesset, to the Knesset, we needed to pass through the checkpoint at the entrance of the Jewish neighborhood. And so the military police stopped us. It was my father, myself, and my older brother. And he said, I need to see your identification. You can't enter the neighborhood until you show me your identification. So my father said, look, it's a Sabbath. I do not carry my identification on a Sabbath because I cannot carry. I don't carry my wallet. I'm the rabbi of the synagogue here. You know, my father looked like a rabbi. He says, you know, I'm the rabbi here of the synagogue. So I have to go to services and lead them. So the military police looked at him. He said, you're the rabbi, yeah, your name, gave him his name. He says, okay. They really saluted him. He says, Faddal, please go. So I saw that as really that they were stationed to protect us and not to imprison us or monitor us. But who knows what it was. And but of course, we started seeing during that time protests in the streets against Israel. And of course, you know, the Jewish community was extremely terrified because of that, because that's always happened and still happens even nowadays, even in the most Western democracies, where if Israel does something, the Jewish community suffers. It's being attacked, killed, badmouthed, demonized, whatever it is. And so it happened there also. But again, I must say that the Lebanese government maintained those protests very well encircled. And as far as I know, no Jewish home or business or synagogue was looted during that time. But of course, after that war, the exodus of Jewish families from Lebanon was completely sped up, so to speak. Every week we would see 3, 4, 5, 6 families leaving Lebanon because they came to the realization that there was no future for the Jewish community there. If the 6-day war did not do it, in a sense, there will be another conflict in the horizon that it will do it. And what really did it was the moment that Arafat and his guerrillas were forced into Lebanon by the Arab League after Black September. September 1970, as you know, the civil war in Jordan between King Hussein and Arafat and his guerrillas. They were expelled from there. No Arab country would receive them, knowing who they were. So Lebanon, as the tiniest Arab country, mostly Christian in makeup, was forced by the Arab Leagues to accept them. And the moment they came, again, the protests, the rallies against Israel, we would see them in the street with Kalashnikovs, with khaki, and they would destroy things on their way. And then the Jewish community, so that was in the 70s, they knew that that's it, it's time to leave. And I would say probably 90% of the Jewish community left by then. And then when the Civil War came, 1974, more people left. We left in 1971. It was at the heel of that because right after the Black September, the picture of my father and the other 2 rabbis of the Bet Din of Lebanon was plastered all over the mosques in Lebanon in large posters with a caption saying, "These are the Zionist agents that are helping Israel." And that picture also appeared in a very important magazine in Lebanon with a whole article about the activities of these Zionist agents. Of course, most of what they said was not true. But, you know, if you live in an Arab country with your picture, with that caption, you're basically a target for assassination with impunity, unfortunately. And so, of course, the 3 rabbis, including my father, hid at home for several weeks until, again, the government kind of guaranteed their safety as much as they could. But my mother took that article and took that picture, sent it to my oldest brother who had already left to Mexico because looking for a new life, as it was known, you know, even before the 1967. And it took 6 months for Mexico to accept us because we were refugees in Lebanon. We could not leave Lebanon to any country because no country will accept us because we were refugees and they will have to accept us as refugees and to resettle us. Of course, no country wants to do that. But Mexico, my brother, became kind of financially responsible for us, for Mexico to accept us. And finally, 6 months later, Mexico accepted us. We received the news on the eve of Passover. Eve of Passover, as you know, at that time, there was no texting, WhatsApp, phone calls, or anything like that. A phone call was extremely expensive, but we received a telegram, a telex. And the telex you had to pay at that time per letter, not per word. And that was also expensive. So it was a very, very short telegram saying basically, "Welcome to Mexico, your papers are ready." So I remember as a child at that time, we celebrated Passover Seder, not by saying, where we have the custom to ask, where you coming from? منين جاي? In Arabic, we say من مصرين, from Egypt. لوين رايح? Where you going? We say to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem. That evening in my family, it says, منين جاي? Where you coming from? From Lebanon. لوين رايح? Where you going? To Mexico. That was our liberating Seder. And it was truly a momentous occasion, because again, we felt prisoners, not because we were mistreated, so to speak, I must say, but because we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't leave the country. And yet now we were able to leave. So for us, it was a liberation. That Passover had a different meaning for us than every year. And that's the story in Lebanon. I'll entertain any questions if you have. You want to have them now or want to have them later, whatever. It's convenient.
Okay. Well, that's a fantastic story, and thank you so much for telling it. I've got a leading question for you, Rabbi, and that is, I mean, you're a Jew living in an Arab country, you're from an Arab country. Do you tell your story to people in the Emirates, and if you do, will it help achieve reconciliation?
I'll tell you, you know, I am the co-president of JJAC, Justice for Jews from Arab Countries, and certainly this country and this region know that. And I have been welcomed with open arms and an embrace, and I have told my story, and I have received a lot of sympathy. I have also received a request from a museum to bring in an exhibit about Jews from Arab countries, their culture, what happened to them. And yes, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. So yes, they're very empathic about it. They're very welcoming, and I've told my story without any censorship at all, not personal, and certainly not from the government. So it has been a welcome story, and many of them were shocked to hear. Believe me, many of them were shocked to hear, were saddened to hear, and they were very empathic about it. Very empathic about it.
That's very interesting. I think we have a question here. Okay, well, if you can stay with us, Rabbi, I mean, we'll wait for more questions to come in. Meanwhile, we'll talk about Morocco, if I may. And we were due to have Penina Elbaz to tell her story about Morocco, but unfortunately, yesterday, for personal reasons, she had to pull out. But the good news is she actually wrote up her story for Harif. And in fact, I included it in my book, Uprooted. Now, Penina Elbaz was 14 in 1967. She was living in the town of Safi in Morocco, where 50,000 Jews still remained. The anti-Jewish atmosphere could have led to violent riots if it were not for the fact that the authorities mounted a massive security operation to prevent loss of life. Nevertheless, about 50,000 Moroccan Jews left at this time, and by 1976, only 18,000 remained. So I will now read you Penina's story. It's called My Ordeal in a Moroccan Jail. In 1967, 1 month after the Six-Day War, we finally decided to go to the beach after several days in hiding because Muslims threw stones at us on the streets or at our house. They were incited to fanaticism by the propaganda news on the radio that was predicting victory and calling for Arabs to destroy Israel and the Jews. They were convinced that the Israelis would lose the 1967 war and that the Arab world was preparing to throw Israelis and Jews into the sea. This is what President Nasser was promising them in the loud radio broadcasts in their homes and in the food stores. As his promise was not fulfilled, the anger over Israel's lightning victory in the Six-Day War engulfed the Jews like a wave of rage. On the beach, some sailors from Holland were chatting with young Jewish girls. The sailors began to sing Hava Nagila. I was not far away, getting ready to climb onto a swing. I stopped. It was very risky to sing in Hebrew in public. What was about to happen? I felt with apprehension, tinged with curiosity, was somewhat surreal. Shortly thereafter, we were surrounded by Moroccan policemen pointing machine guns and shouting, "All Jews to the police van." Several people tried to intervene and save us from the forthcoming ordeal, but in vain. We obeyed. The police did not listen. They gave orders. As we were wearing bathing suits, we were permitted to get dressed. I went into a cabin and changed slowly, taking an eternity before being arrested. There I was, arrested in Safi at the age of 14 with a group of Jews accused of having sung Hava Nagila in public to celebrate Israel's victory. We were also charged with being Zionist spies. In the police van, we sensed that we were being sucked into a dreadful abyss. At the police station, the Dutch sailors came out with ashen white faces after interrogation and were sent back to their country. We stood in line. Inspector Birada called out my name. By nature, I hate injustice and am outspoken. He asked me if I spoke Hebrew. I replied no, but added that I went to the Alliance Israélite school where we had the right to learn Hebrew and sing prayers and Hebrew songs. So we did not do anything wrong. He was very shocked and asked me where this school was located. A secretary was typing every word at full speed. Very quickly, I lost my composure and became anguished over seemingly having betrayed my own kind. Daniel Israel, aged 17 or 18, was particularly badly treated because of his surname. How come he retained his dignity and gentleness? The other two boys, Armand and Guy, showed tremendous resilience, honor, and dignity in the face of savage and unjust accusations and ill treatment. Most of us were holding up as best we could, but endured extremely painful moments. We supported each other, building a strong bond out of a nightmare. Lison reinvented herself as a comic, as if by magic transporting us to a different place through laughter. We were questioned one by one until late. These interrogations were awful. The police inspector was seeking to make us admit that we were singing an Israeli song in public to celebrate Israel's victory, that we were spies and Zionists. However, no Jew would have had the courage to sing in public in Hebrew. Only the two sailors from Holland had done the singing. Who knows what damage had been done to the psyche of each of us, our parents, brothers, and sisters, following our arrest. We were photographed and fingerprinted as though we were criminals. Did we have a case file? There was no court trial. No lawyer had the courage either to represent or to defend us. Outside the prison gates, fanatical Muslims clamored their hatred. They were there at all times, behind the gates, ready to kill. It was scary to see and hear them whenever the jail gates were opened. As no lawyer would take our case out of fear, my brother Edmond and Mr. Moran went to Rabat to plead the case for our release. All this was undertaken discreetly. Theirs was a very difficult and risky attempt to reach the king and get us freed. Weaving their way through the bureaucracy, they had to plead, give out bribes, and submit to harassment, intimidation, and direct threats of arrest. One could not denounce the injustice for fear of inflaming the fanatics. During 12 days, we slept on cold cement. We ate what our families brought us each evening. They came regularly, despite the fact they had to run the gauntlet of insults and physical threats. We slept in the same clothing from the beach, shivering in the night cold. We did not have washing facilities. The 3 Jewish males took it in turns to watch over us at night. They said they were guarding us from the criminals, delinquents, and alcoholics brought in nightly by the police and dumped in the next corridor. At the end of 12 days, the police came to tell us that 2 of us, Poupée and me, would be released in the dead of night. The idea of being outside alone at night sent us into a panic. Our fellow inmates gave us beach towels to cover up, money for a taxi, and egged us on to leave the jail. The prison was far away. I wanted to go home, but I did not know where to find my family. They had moved for security reasons under the constant threat of brutality. We all left Morocco as fast as we were able to. We had to pay large bribes to get passports to leave Morocco. It took many months' worth of my dad's salary to get our passports. Otherwise, we would have been refused them. We wanted to go to Canada. Many people from my hometown, Safi, were not able to get passports, but Moroccan Jews did not need passports to go to Israel. That's Penina's story. I think I would just carry on and mention Tunisia. I think we have to mention Tunisia because there was a very violent riot, and I think a couple of Jews were murdered, and the Great Synagogue was damaged in the riot. So perhaps I could just tell you a little bit about what happened in Tunisia. On June the 5th, 1967, thousands of residents of Tunis went on the rampage against the city's Jews. About 100 Jewish-owned businesses were attacked and looted, windows were smashed, cars were overturned, and the Great Synagogue on Tunis Avenue de la Liberté was ransacked and set on fire. Rioters called to throw the Jews into the sea and to burn them. The rioting lasted up to 6 hours. The police apparently took little action to bring it to an end. The Tunisian president Bourguiba went on TV to apologize, but it was too late. The beautiful modernist Great Synagogue has since been restored, and you can see it here on the screen. Sylvain Hayoun witnessed the burning of the Great Synagogue in Tunis. His mother ran to escape the mob. To my disappointment, he said, I saw some neighbors pointing out to the mob Jewish stores and cars to be burnt, he recalls. When you are a target for repression, even when not openly state-sponsored, you don't see any peaceful future for you and your kids. You don't have much choice than to try to leave the country. And when his parents made this choice in October 1967, they couldn't take more than 1 suitcase and 50 dinars, probably equivalent to $100 then. Necklaces or anything in gold were confiscated at the point of departure, and they closed their apartment door, leaving everything in it. So actually another question for Rabbi Abadi, perhaps. What happens to the property that all the Jews left behind during their exodus?
Well, some of them still retain the deed, with them, especially those who lived in Saida and Sidon. Um, it's most people, well, in Syria, yeah, people left all their property, but in Lebanon, many people were able to either sell their property or to leave it to somebody else to sell it for them. Because Lebanon, the Jews there did not have to leave overnight, so to speak. They planned their exodus starting from 1958, which first 1956, this Sinai campaign. Then 1958, there was a small mini revolution in Lebanon, which did not succeed because the American Sixth Fleet came for the rescue, to the rescue of the government. So Jews left then, and then after 67, also Jews, so most of the Jews planned their exodus, except once the civil war took place, then many people had to leave kind of overnight, or they had to hide somewhere else, not because they were killing Jews. The Jews were not the target of the civil war, but many of them were killed in the crossfire. And many of them, to tell you that what happened in the Civil War was a carnage that certainly is a war crime. And it was a religious war. It wasn't just a political war. So you have the Christians against the Muslims and the Muslims against the Christians. But even amongst the Christians, the different Christian groups against each other, and the Muslims, different Muslims group against each other. So they would, and it was door-to-door fighting. They would go into a building. Let's say a Christian group goes into a building, they would bring down all their population. And each one had to prove if they were Christians, they would save them. If they were Muslims, they would kill them. If they were Jews, it depends on sometimes they kill them, sometimes they also save them. Now, the same thing happened if Muslims came to a building and brought all the inhabitants of that building down. If they were Christians, they would kill them. If they're Muslims, they would save them. If they were Jews, depending on the person hated Jews, they would kill them. Otherwise, they would save them. So the Jews that died in the Civil War died that way, or crossfire. And I know several that happened to have been killed that way. So some of them did leave the country and left their property there. It's not known exactly how much of that it's still there if they didn't go back after and they sold it, or they had it sold by somebody else. So after the Civil War, very, very few Jews were left. But believe it or not, when Israel invaded in 1982, they found some Jews there and they helped them leave Lebanon. Somehow, some of these Lebanese Jews were resilient about leaving. They stayed there. And so probably whoever was left there, which was probably less than 10% of the original Jewish Lebanese population, 90% of them, Israel, either helped them escape, leave, or they went back with Israel. And then nowadays you have Jews in Lebanon, I would say less than 20 people. They're not, they don't form a community. Some of them don't know of the other one because they live in different places. And many of them, if not most of them, live under the radar. Again, maybe some of their friends, they're known Jews, but it's not known about them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, very few, very small amount of property was left unclaimed. Mm-hmm.
What about property owned by Jews generally in Arab countries? For instance, I mean, would Arela be able to claim compensation, for instance, for her family's property, her father's shop? Right. I mean, is there any avenue?
So basically, Jews from Syria, from Iraq, from Egypt, from Libya, from Tunisia, from probably some of them even from Morocco, and from Algeria, definitely Yemen and Aden. They all left property there. They all left property there that they can claim theoretically. But they all left property, and eventually, I guess the Arab countries, or those 10 Arab countries that expelled or imprisoned or persecuted their Jews, they need to face basically reality and realize that they owe a lot to the Jewish community, not just because of their culture and economy, but of the property that the Jews left there. Not left, that they were basically taken away from them. And they couldn't sell it, and they couldn't, and even in places that they could, they were not able to legally because they were nationalized. Their properties were nationalized. So we're working on that, as you know, and it's something that eventually it needs to be brought to international bodies and platforms that there should be equity, redress, and compensation for those. I know for a fact that the Syrian government has kept most, if not all, of Jewish property empty. They did not allow those properties to be vandalized by the local population. In fact, I understand in Syria there is a government office that's in charge of Jewish property. They still have all the keys of all the property that the Jews own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if in other countries is the same. I doubt it.
Mm-hmm. Can you put a figure on the value of Jewish property lost, or is that difficult to say?
Well, a number has been floating for a few years, and that is of $300 billion of today's dollars. But that's the number that has been floating.
Right. More or less.
More or less.
Okay, I think we had a question from Monica. She asked, do you ever feel afraid?
Where?
I suppose in Dubai.
Not at all. Not at all. I don't feel afraid. I could tell you that the Emirates, it's the safest place for a Jew to be. Now, you may not believe me, but I can guarantee you that. There's no other place in the world, not even Israel, where it's as safe for a Jew to be than the Emirates. In the last 2 years that I have been here, I have not heard of any anti-Semitic incident. I personally did not hear of any slur directed to me, nor any member of the Jewish community have reported to me a slur. There is a law on the books here that if anybody insults somebody else because of their religion, ethnicity, right, or nationality, it's a 5-year prison term and 250,000 dirhams, which is like $80,000, $75,000 as a fine.
Wow.
So yes, I don't feel afraid. I walk anywhere with my kippah or with my rabbinic garb at any time in any neighborhood. I was never given an ugly look or something like that.
Right.
I tell you a story. When I arrived a week after that, I was meeting with government officials, so I asked one of the ministers if I need a security detail to be with me. As I'm known now, I've been on television and newspaper, my photos everywhere. So I said, look, I'm living in an Arab country and, I'll be a target. So the minister says, did anybody give you a bad look? I said, no. Did anybody say anything to you? I said, no. I said, did anybody do anything to you? I said, no, I'm just, He said, let me assure you. He says, if you want security detail because psychologically you'll feel better, we'll give you one. Nothing to worry about. But let me assure you that you don't need it, because from the moment you got off that plane, we have been protecting you. So don't worry about it. So from that moment on, I stopped what we call in New York jaywalking, because I didn't want to get a phone call from the government telling me, Rabbi, please don't, don't violate our
There's a big fine for that. Yeah.
So I know I'm being protected. So I feel very safe and very comfortable.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We've had a question about the synagogue in Aden. It's actually the cemetery. being restored. And actually, I just want to ask the rabbi, do you have any inside knowledge about, you know, how come the Aden authorities agreed to restore the cemetery? Did the UAE have any influence over them?
I know the UAE have used its goodwill and its influence in Yemen and in Aden about several issues. Some of them, of course, having to do with rescuing Yemenite Jews, actually, twice last year.
Mhm.
That I was involved personally also. I think Aden wants to also show to the world their goodwill vis-a-vis the Jew. There is some sort of an awakening in all Arab countries, actually, that they want to separate between Israel and the Jewish religion or Jews. If they have something politically against Israel, they are learning and they are changing their approach and saying that the Jews or Jewish religion is not responsible for Israel in that sense. And so many now government and several Arab countries are switching that policy in which they, like even in Iran claims that that's the case. And they allow the Jews to worship and they facilitate their faith and things like that. So it's happening around that they want to separate between what Israel is and what the Jewish people are. And I think that's a good positive step. At least it's a first beginning step that it's positive.
Right.
That the Jewish people should not be held responsible or demonized or delegitimized or attacked because Israel has done something that they don't like.
Right. And Arela, would you like to comment on that? I mean, how do you feel about Aden restoring the cemetery?
Well, so it's a good move. It's a good first move. That's good. I don't think that any of the Adenists will go back, but yeah, that's a good move.
Lena, if I'll tell you my experience with Egypt, Egypt has restored the Bassatin cemetery, which is the largest Jewish cemetery in the world, dating thousands of years. I met with President al-Sisi 3 years ago. It was at 2 p.m. in his palace, and I requested the Bassatin be restored, and because what was happening is the wall had broken and they were using it as a garbage dump, and that you could not see the tombstones anymore. And I tell you, and the members of the community, which at that time they numbered 7 Jews in Egypt, 4 in Alexandria, 3 in Cairo, which unfortunately they did not talk to each other. But the Cairo people.
That's very Jewish.
Yes, but the Cairo people, they had spoken to me that they've tried and tried and tried, and to no avail. They tell them yes, nothing happened. But so I spoke with President al-Sisi. It was at 2 p.m. At 4 p.m. I get a call from the one in charge of the Jewish community in Cairo. He said, "What happened? Tractors are entering the Jewish cemetery and they're starting the cleanup." I said, 2 hours ago, President al-Sisi promised me that he will take care of it. Apparently, he's fulfilling his word. It took 2 hours, and already cleanup crew entered into the cemetery to clean it. And now, of course, then it took 6 months. It takes a long time to clean it. They built a whole new wall. They pretty much restored it. So that's a good sign also. That's taking great responsibility. And I commend President al-Sisi, and I thank him for his immediate intervention.
The burning question is he about to release the communal records to the Jewish community?
So I made that request also at that time. And he said that the communal records are paternity of Egypt, are the cultural
heritage.
Heritage of Egypt.
Heritage.
But, and I also asked him to release at least some of the 173 Torah scrolls that still are in Egypt. And he said, Rabbi, he said, it's heritage culture of Egypt, but I understand that, you know, it's value to the Jewish community because after all, it's the Jewish community heritage too. He says, any document that you want, I'll make you a copy of it, but the original will stay. When I asked him for the Torah scroll, he says, I'll also make a copy of it. So I was trying to explain to him that you can't make copy of that. We need the original. As far as I know, they're cataloging all the records. There is a professor from Israeli University,
Yes.
who is in Egypt,
Yeah.
and he is cataloging all those documents. So those documents, I do believe and I trust that they will be released eventually, right? For studies, for research, for this, but they will remain in Egypt. But the promise of the president is, if people want to make a copy of that document, he says, I'll make it and I'll pay for it. So I think we could trust in that promise.
Well, it would be nice to see any actual results of that promise. Yeah, that's great.
Hope so.
Yeah, we have a bit of a cynical comment there from Samish. Restoring historical edifices, in his view, is only a thing to evade the real issue of accepting Jews as individuals and accepting Jewish history and Jewish homeland. What do you say to that?
Let me answer to that. I don't agree, I'll tell you the truth, because when you restore historical edifices, you're giving recognition of the existence of the Jewish community there, that there was a Jewish community. Because when you restore it and you put a plaque saying this belonged to the Jewish community, as I saw with my own eyes, the Ben Ezra synagogue in Fostat in Egypt, in Cairo, there was a plaque that says this is property of the Jewish community. And so, yes, it's not the full length of what we are looking and asking for, but it's the step in the right direction. When you restore edifices, basically you are recognizing that there was a Jewish community, and therefore those edifices deserve to be restored. That's the first step. But of course, we're not going to stop there. We're going to, you know, request more of a recognition than that.
Right. Okay, just as question from Lawrence, if you had the opportunity to go back to Lebanon, would you go? And that's also a question for Arela. Would you go back to Aden?
I don't think so. If you ask my mother, she probably would have said yes, because life was very good. I mean, they had a very good standard of living before they left, really. But my memories towards the end, it wasn't very happy. So I probably would not.
Okay. And you, Rabbi?
So you know, to go and live in Lebanon needs to undergo a great change that I hope we can see it in our lifetime. I still have the hopes. But to go and visit, I had planned a trip 11 years ago, Syria and Lebanon, with the cooperation of the highest echelons of the Syrian government, including President Assad himself. He said, I will open the red carpet for you. Just come, bring your people, let them see Syria. I'll take you to Lebanon. I'll provide transportation, security, everything that you need, all on me. And we created a trip. I was able to register more than 70 people. We wanted to have only one bus. We needed to have 2 buses, and there more. I said, I have to stop there. From Jews from Syria and Lebanon, from all over the world, wanted to come and see either their own homes, their own places, or their parents' homes. The trip was scheduled for May 2011. The civil war started in February 2011. So they wanted me to postpone it. I said, no, the war is in the south of Syria. We're not going to get there. We're just going to go to Aleppo and Damascus and Lebanon. By end of March, the situation became unattainable for them. They told me, we're very sorry. We cannot give you the proper attention, the proper security. So unfortunately, we lost that opportunity and we never went. This past summer, there was a discussion of me visiting Lebanon on an official capacity. they told me I'll be more than welcome to come and visit. They'll welcome me. They'll secure and everything. However, they cannot commit fully to my security because they said, you know, there can be any crazy guy who may want to do a terrorist attack, and we don't want to take that responsibility.
Mm.
Well, needless to say, I said, let's wait.
Very diplomatic. Yes. Okay, so I think there was just one comment from Yardena. Her parents left 2 homes in Yemen in 1943, and her father continued to pay his last payments for one of the homes while in Israel, even though it was not his anymore. Oh, wow.
Well, Lynn, I've got a question for you. If you got the opportunity to go back to Iraq, would you go?
Well, I wasn't born in Iraq, so I don't think technically it's relevant. Maybe you could ask my mother that. Anyway, I don't want to keep you any longer, Rabbi Abadi, but it's been absolutely fascinating, and thank you very much for telling your story and asking and answering our questions. And thank you, Arela, for telling yours.
Pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us. It's been a real pleasure having you. So just to tell you about our forthcoming program, we're not having any more lockdown lectures in October because of the Chagim. They all seem to fall on a Tuesday, which is our regular day. So the next one will be on the 1st of November, when I will be talking about the Jews of Tunisia. So I look forward to seeing you all then. And again, thank you for coming. Chag Sameach, Chag Sukkot Sameach, Tizku Lishanim Rabot. And as is our custom, I think we will now unmute everybody so that you can
I thought we
say hello.
These are
These are the advertisements. Just a minute, commercial break. Okay.
Oh, that's tonight's one. I can go
Yeah.
through that quickly.
Okay, but just if you just unmute.
Right. Okay. Everyone can now unmute themselves. Oops. That's silent.
Hello, anybody there?
Yeah, turn off the slide.
Turn off the slides. Okay, we'll turn them off soon. Yeah, okay. Who said that?
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, Sam.
I
Yeah,
want to thank everybody for the very interesting talk, especially the story of Aden and Rabbi Dr. Abadi, I should say, because don't forget he's a doctor before being a
yeah,
rabbi.
of course he is. He is. Yeah. My bad. My bad. Okay.
For Ariella, did you know any Farhi in Aden? There was some in Yemen.
There was, I didn't know any Farhis, but there was a famous shul, the Al Farhi. It is a shul, and it's a from shul. But no, I didn't know any Farhi. There's Al Farhi Sefer Torah, but it's a shul.
Yeah.
Al Farhi.
Because they've been there for a long time, apparently.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. It's not my...
Just to answer Mark Brecker's question about Asmara, we were not going to discuss any kind of satellite communities of the Adeni Jews like Asmara, which is actually in Africa. And the Adenis went everywhere, didn't they? They went to India and they went to Ethiopia and I think, and Port Said. So there's plenty of material there for future lockdown lectures.
Yes,
And you also asked about the Great Synagogue in Aden. Well, I think let them restore the Aden Cemetery first before they start on the synagogue.
Synagogue. I
Don't
think
you agree? Yeah.
there was an attempt to burn the synagogue, but I think it was partially damaged, but that's not badly, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and Samish, yes, we are having Shmuel Trigano in December. So thank you for prompting me to get in touch with him, actually. He'll be talking in French, but I think it'll be absolutely fascinating.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
Yes,
so
I'm really
am I.
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
To add something regarding the effect of the 6-day war, in Morocco, I recall that there was a boycott for Jewish
Mhm.
businesses in Casablanca.
Yeah, I think
So
you're right.
the situation was very tense. But I was about 12, 11 years old, and I didn't really understand what's going on, but we understood that there was something going on, and most of the businesses were closed. But I haven't heard of any sort of like experience as Albaz Penina has experienced in Safi. So there were tense moments, and there were like a manifestation outside, people screaming bloody murder against Israel, but there was no individual violence against individuals, or maybe there were, but they were not really talked about. But however, the party leader, the Istiqlal party, who was in power at that time, not the king, were asked for a population to boycott businesses.
Mhm.
And that probably some Moroccan did not go to businesses, Jewish businesses, and probably didn't buy things. But after a week or 10 days afterwards, everything became normal.
Mhm. That's fascinating. Thank you. What year did you actually leave Morocco?
Oh, it's 1970.
Right.
Yeah.
And would you say the 6-day war had an effect on your family? Made you think there was a future? in
Yeah.
Morocco?
Yeah, there was some effect, because we were like we were well entrenched in the society. There was no anti-Semitism against my family, but we understood where we stood, and we had friends, and even Arab friends did not really say anything about it. They read, they hook up with the Europe 1, Radio Internationale. They heard the defeat much earlier than the public.
Mhm.
So the educated people really knew what was going on. So it was no effect as much as to me, to my family. There was no bad effects, but I'm sure there's a lot of other individuals have experienced some sort of anti-Semitism. But in general, like we know that businesses were boycotted, and but that didn't mean anything at all for the Jewish businesses, because they carried on with their own clientele, and it was fine. So
yeah, I think it was very different in Casablanca, being a big city.
Yeah, I agree.
Cosmopolitan city.
Cosmopolitan,
Safi was a small place, and I think Penina lived in a mixed area, and there were daily clashes with the Arabs.
Right.
Yeah,
That's true. That's true. If you're like in a rural area with less protection, that's you would be you would be probably touched by the effect of the war. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, thank you to everyone who's thanked us. And still 19 people on board. Anyone want to say anything?
I think I'll just make one comment. Listening to the horrific accounts of Penina, a rabbi, we didn't suffer as much because Aden was a British colony, and therefore we were protected. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't as horrific as the things that they had to go through. I think that made a lot of difference.
Yeah. And actually, as you made the point that in 1947 you were not protected, and in fact it was the British trained levies who actually opened fire on the Jews.
That's right. Yes. I'm convinced if the British pulled out and the Jews were still in Aden, I'm sure we'll not be allowed today. In fact, when Mr. Marx came to Aden to organize us leaving, he once said to me, "You're very lucky to be still alive."
Yeah, that's very interesting. And
Yeah.
actually, for the record, Michelle Huberman of Harif, the creative director of Harif, did organize an event we had at the Stamford Hill Synagogue, in which Nigel Grizzard gave a talk about Abraham Marx and how he helped save the Jews of Aden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I might add an anecdote that usually Morocco has always been a pariah among Arab nations, progressive Marxist Arab nation or not. The Arab nationalism wasn't really deeply rooted in the Moroccan politics, maybe due to the monarchy, I'm not so sure.
Mhm.
But as you recall, before the Six-Day War, there was an Islamic Arab meeting in Casablanca. I think it was
Yeah.
1966, I believe. Now, about 2 years ago, I read an article that the Israeli army or the Israeli intelligence received, had what do you call it, eavesdropping on the Casablanca hotel, where all the delegates, so all the Arabs were discussing their military mights and whatever, right? So basically, Morocco was full of apparently Mossad spies eavesdropping on the Arabs talking about what next to do. Of course, Nasser was there. So basically, and now the blame is all against the king of the King Hassan II, you know, for being part of this ploy to undermine the Arab armies by giving all the information to Israel to know exactly what the army was, whether they were powerful or not. Well, we knew they were not powerful.
Yeah.
They had armament, they had personnel, but they did not know how to make wars, especially in the modern era. But anyway, it was funny because now it's like, oh, it's a King Morocco. He's bad or whatever. Yeah. So I said, okay, good for him that he helped the cause of the Jews in general to be able to survive the onslaught of 1967 war. But anyway, I just wanted to add this because now it's just spreading all around that Morocco was really what helped Israel beat the greatest armies in the world. So I don't know.
Another conspiracy theory.
Yeah, exactly. It's a conspiracy. What's going on? Maybe it was true, but what would you do if you were in the place of Israel and you know that everybody was to push you on the sea? I mean, you know, what would you do? You just sit around and wait? You can't. You have to do something to know whether the armies are good enough to invade you. And they knew ahead of time they were not up to what they were saying.
Yes.
I mean, it's all facade. It's all facade. So the games is, you know. So anyway, I just wanted to add this about the 60-day wars. It's kind of funny to see that Morocco has always been because of it being a monarchy, which is like something that shouldn't happen in the Arab world. It's the only, well, as if Saudi Arabia does not exist. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to add that just to to add some discussion anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we better call it a day. And thank you all once again.
Great evening. Very good. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Michelle. And thanks to Lawrence, who's always in the background, making everything work. Thanks to the whole Harif team, who I think they're all here, aren't you? Just
thanks for everyone.
Wave.
Okay.
Thanks again. And
thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, Lynn, for everything. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for joining us and hope to see you again soon.
And Shana Tova.
Shana Tova again.
Shana Tova. Hi, Pamela. Hello, Michelle.
Okay, I'm going to end the meeting in about 10 seconds. So last goodbyes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.